Chronic Hoosier jumping on to join us. Buddy, how's it going, man?
What up?
Well, it's been a good run for Indiana basketball, both sides of the sport. We haven't talked about the women yet today, but I'll go ahead now and mention last night they went to Columbus and ran the Buckeyes out of the gym. I was at Mike Woodson's show at Southern Stone Restaurant inside Indiana basketball last night and had the game on and looked up, and it was the second quarter. They're already up by 20. It was 47-27. I'm like, what, are you kidding me? This is a team that was ranked number 2 in the country, Ohio State. And Indiana is at their place running them out of the gym, and they're up by as much as 27, end up winning 83-59. But Indiana women's team is just still rolling. They are a solid number 2 in the AP poll, and it's just been a tremendous lifetime season for this team.
Yeah, I continue to say it.
And not to interrupt you, and a sold-out Purdue game coming up.
Yes. No, every time you turn around, the IU women are rewriting history, hitting another milestone. Whether it be program rankings, consecutive wins, etc., all the way on down the line. They're just a buzzsaw right now. I don't know how else to describe them, but when you see them, particularly what we've seen, their ability to close, Iowa was really, really tight with them. We saw it against their first battle against Ohio State, where they played really tight throughout the first half. Same with the Wolverines just prior to that, all the way down the line. These girls just close basketball games like professional assassins. I mean, it's just like nothing I've seen. Certainly not the women's game. I don't know what the best comp is, even on the men's side, but it's just absolute dominance right now from Terry Morin's squad. And it's remarkable to see the way in which the team's being embraced. The fans are coming out supporting. Slowly the national media taking better note, although, Mackenzie Holmes continues to get overlooked for the unbelievable season she's having and the leadership she's showing. One of the best parts about this team is it doesn't seem to affect them. It only motivates them. Just truly selfless, gorgeous basketball being played right now in Assembly Hall by both teams, quite frankly.
Well, and what's always, not always, but what's been fun to watch this season when you talk about the women's team too, is they have some really great pieces. But they don't have a Caitlin Clark. They just move the ball extremely well. Grace Berger is aggressive. Mackenzie Holmes is really good under the basket. They've got Jim Coulter, the best shooter at Indiana, and Sarah Scalia. Like, they just have all the pieces. And when you watch their ball movement, I mean, it is incredibly fun basketball to watch. And it doesn't matter whether you're in NBA, high school, college basketball, the way they play, their floor spacing, the way they distribute, the way they're unselfish. I mean, that's the way the game is supposed to be played.
No, 100%. I've said it before. There are some teams that are really skilled. They just have a ton of talent. There are some teams that are really, really tough, just fight you for every inch of the floor. And some teams are just really connected, the way that they play for each other. Yeah. And Terry Morin seems to have hit the trifecta with this squad. Their grit, their resiliency, their skill. I mean, it's unbelievable to think that after all that they've replaced in the last 6 seasons, that somehow they would find a way to improve, and they just keep on getting better every year. There's no doubt Mackenzie Holmes deserves the Player of the Year to be in the Player of the Year conversation. But you look at Grace Berger, the fact that she was able to come back from her injury and be this effective this quickly is nothing short of remarkable. And she, in my mind, is quite honestly one of the toughest Hoosiers in any sport that I've ever seen live. Just a pure competitor in every sense of the word. And then you throw in the Chloe Moore McNeil, just a tremendous example of the development that can happen within the program. Sarah Scalia, obviously just a phenomenal reserve for Indiana right now. She can light teams up. Transfer Sydney Parrish. I mean, all the way down the line. Yarden, just putting together an absolute monster. And, in years past, I felt like Indiana has had some very, very competitive teams when it came to the Big Ten contention. And, the Big Ten as a whole has been apexing over the same period that IU's been ascendant. This looks like it could be the year that they break through, though, and they hang the banner for the Big Ten title. Every game where you expect maybe this is the one where they slip a little bit, they dig a little bit deeper and they find a way, whether it was Iowa at home the other night or to go on the road against that game on national television and turn around and just boat race the number 13 team straight out of their gym, quite honestly. Right now, Terry Morin's biggest struggle is probably keeping them tuned up when you're, sniffing a 30-point lead on the road. Just nothing short of remarkable.
Yeah, the Big Ten has been a little different this year. It is going to be absolutely incredibly difficult to win the Big Ten championship. But, and that's not because they're so deep. The Big Ten's not deep in women's basketball this year, but the top is so heavy. It's as heavy as you can imagine because you've got Indiana, which is one of the top teams in the country, Iowa right behind them. You've got Ohio State, who was until Indiana dismantled them, but you've got Maryland. So those three, Maryland, Iowa, and Indiana, three of the top teams in the country, and Indiana has to play them twice. Then they're going to have to play one of them again in at least maybe both in the NCAA or Big Ten tournament. So that is why it is so tough. You're playing against basically a top 5 team in Iowa in winning that. So if they get that done, it is an accomplishment, not just because of the history, but what who they're beating. They're beating Caitlin Clark, who, while is not one of my favorite players, is one of the best players in women's basketball. Someone said something yesterday about her, and I'm like, they were acknowledging the exposure that Caitlin was helping bring, and I'm like, you're right, it is, and it would be a lot nicer if she probably gave credit to the teams that she played, especially those that beat her, to bring more into that, but she doesn't do that, which is fine. But that's that little deal on that. But that's my little soapbox.
Yeah, it very much felt like that game the other night against Iowa. That was a Final Four caliber game. I mean, quite honestly.
Oh my God. Absolutely.
Tremendous talent on both sides of the floor.
Battling.
Yeah. And, Caitlin Clark is a generational talent in the women's game. Indiana is a generational talent as far as a roster construction right now. And I don't know. You'd almost have to go back to the 92-93 men's team to find probably a more complete roster, a more competitive roster in Indiana basketball, men's or women's. What they're doing right now is just nothing short of exceptional. And, they still get to face Iowa again to close the season. They've still got the Boilermakers coming to town next week. And then, we get Michigan, who's, again, no slouch. They're currently 4th in the Big Ten right now. So still a really, really tough road if Indiana wants to hang that banner. But definitely some winnable games left on the schedule, and then one hell of a rematch to wrap things up before the Big Ten tournament starts. So I don't see any signs of slowing down. Quite the opposite. They look like they're just picking up steam and determination, especially after that big battle between the undefeateds with LSU and South Carolina really kind of separated USC from the rest of the field. I think Indiana is very unequivocally making a case they deserve to be in that conversation for the best team in the country, and certainly going to be a very, very big threat come the NCAA tournament.
Ifs and nuts were if they hadn't lost that game, I was going to say if they hadn't lost that game to Michigan State, that's when Grace Berger was hurt. I hate it for them because they would be undefeated and have a shot to go undefeated through Big Ten play. Hate that for them in that regard. But on the men's side, also a Big Ten race, possibly. Indiana needs some help, Chronic, and it could be kind of playing into their hands. Purdue goes to Maryland next, the team that is the only team in the Big Ten not to lose a home game this year. I don't know if Maryland has, if they can exploit Purdue with the way they win. It's going to be interesting. But that would be if Indiana can get the win at Northwestern, and if Maryland were to upset Purdue, oh my, would we have a party to start planning for, not in the regard of a hell of a showdown coming.
No doubt. What looked like it was going to be a runaway, it seems like Indiana may be exposed a blueprint for how to tackle these Boilers. Northwestern certainly exploited it Sunday night. Woodson acknowledged last night he saw a lot of stuff that looked like the Wildcats had borrowed from Indiana against the Boilers. I think that's probably their Achilles heel right now as well. I think they have a great backcourt. When the proper pressure is applied, you can kind of exploit some of their inexperience, some of their youth, and that seems to cascade across the floor for them at times. I don't know that. Who knows? I mean, Purdue has played some really good basketball this year. They've certainly shown some vulnerabilities right now. I think for Indiana, the key is going to be not looking too far ahead. That was one thing we talked about early in the season when all the accolades were pouring in and the preseason projections is, one of the big questions is how does Indiana handle those expectations? And while they certainly stumbled a little bit there around the turn of the year, I was looking back this weekend at historically, when's the last time that we saw Indiana put together these types of runs, where they're able to go 7-1 or greater over a stretch of Big Ten games. And you've got to go back to the 16 season, the 13 season, they put together 2 of those runs. The 12 season, they were able to put a pretty strong run together. Prior to that, we didn't see it since 2002. And then prior to that, since 93, which was, a whole separate level of dominance. But just recognizing how difficult what they've accomplished has been in light of the injuries. And, they continue to deal with that now with Race Thompson. I'm not sure exactly what it is, if it's a continuation of the prior or what have you.
No, it's something different. I was told it's a different, it's not the knee.
Nevertheless, they've figured out a way, and they have been able to remix the chemistry and put together just a hell of a run here to put themselves back into contention. And right now, I think it's certainly reasonable to expect Indiana to be able to compete for the double bye in the Big Ten tournament. And who knows? We'll see how things break here. All it takes is one more loss from the Boilers, and then Indiana basically has their destiny in their hands as far as the Big Ten title. Right now they're 2 games back, and with Purdue still on the schedule, Indiana only needs help from one other team to put that at least a share of the Big Ten title in reach. So still a ton left to play for. Indiana steadily climbing up the seed lines as they've climbed up the rankings, back into the rankings, and continuing to move up. So the big thing right now is you just can't lose that momentum with a massive game at Northwestern here tomorrow night. What's ultimately going to decide second place in the Big Ten as things stand right now.
I mentioned I sent out a tweet the other day, which drew a lot of attention because people assume certain things. But there was what I'm calling a line of demarcation for this team this year. They had, they went into that dip where people talk about them losing 3 games. Man, if it hadn't been for Elon and Kennesaw State being on the schedule, they would have lost 5 straight. That was kind of buoyed around that thing, and it was not one thing. It certainly wasn't just Trace Jackson Davis is back. It was a myriad of things, and I don't think people get that. And it certainly, things did not change because of a letter, which cracks me up that anyone would actually think that, or to think that I think that. But that was a time of demarcation in a myriad of ways, because you've got the injuries that are happening to various guys, but this team is still young. Then one of the injuries is to Xavier Johnson. So now you've got to kind of change your offense, which now they've got to do that, something they had not done. They, against practiced all summer and through the fall with different characters now. So they had to change that around. Trace is back, obviously gets a little healthy, but Jalen Hood-Schifino gets better. This team finally gets more comfortable as a unit and are doing Miller Kopp doing things like playing great defense in Michigan or scoring 18 points in the game before that. He was not doing that either. They have a team meeting as well, but there was a line of demarcation in that period, Chronic, and this team has changed. Their identity, their mindset, everything is different, and it has been different from that period. It's not because of a letter. And I wish that's why I did not reference or credit it or name it. It's a period of time to me, really. It's a coagulation of all of that stuff, in addition to just getting better, being coached, being understanding that defense and playing as hard as they can every game is the difference. That's why they won that Purdue game. They played like their head was on fire.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think when you go back and look, the way that Trace has exerted himself, and really just refused to lose. You very much get the sense of a senior who's embraced the leadership mantle and has fully actualized what it's going to take for him, both individually and as a teammate, to put the Hoosiers in a position to win. I think at the same time, you look at the maturation of Jalen Hood-Schifino having to not only get acclimated to the college game, but now having to assume that role without his backcourt mate in Xavier Johnson being available. It really has given Indiana, what's effectively a two-legged table at the moment, where on any given night, those two guys are going to be, generally, you can expect them to be stalwarts. It's just a matter of figuring out where the matchups are going to lead for somebody else to step up and make an impact. And as we've seen, it could be Miller, it could be Galloway, it could be Geronimo, on down the line right now. But, getting consistent high-level production from your point guard and, from your All-American big man and just filling in the gaps has, it's been a process. And I think it's an ongoing one as a lot of guys continue to round out to form. I was having a conversation with a good buddy talking about some of tomorrow's struggles. And it's like, everybody is on a schedule, if you will. There are some guys that you probably don't expect to see around very long. Hood-Schifino in that category. Trace was in that category for most of his career. There was always a question at the end of every season what he intended to do, whether or not we would get him back. But beyond that, most of these guys are program players, guys that you expect to have for a number of years, that you expect to, as they continue to develop, you expect to continue to be able to lean on them more heavily. And I think what we've seen here is a lot of those guys starting to come to fruition, while recognizing that it's not like I've said it many times, it's not always going to be linear. But these guys figuring out what their roles are, what they need to do to fill those roles, and then on any given night, getting the matchups that are favorable for those guys, really stepping up and exceeding their potential, or at least achieving their potential. Leadership's contagious. Winning is contagious. And, I agree. I don't think it was necessarily a letter that spurred all this, although it does kind of crack me up. The contemporaneousness of it had me thinking the other night after that game, what's old boy feel? What was his name? Tim something. Tim Weaver.
I'm not saying it. I have not said it. Damn it. I have said it.
I said
it.
And
I'm not going to say it.
Do you think Tim is he stoked that the Hoosiers are winning now? Does he take credit for it? Is he a little, is he frustrated that he was proven to be a complete moron? I wonder how conflicted this run has been and what his feelings on it are.
I feel sorry for him, to be honest with you, because I'm like, okay, first of all, for someone to actually sit down, write a letter, fold it,
handwrite a letter,
in an envelope, handwrite a letter, fold it, put it in an envelope, lick the stamp, put it on there,
pay for postage
to the mailbox and send it. I'm like, first of all, I didn't know people still did that. I'm kidding. But I'm like, who does that? Okay, so every normal adult should knows that you're not going to do that. You're not writing letters to college athletes, and I don't need to tell you that. If you need me to tell you that, then you've got bigger issues. And if you believe that I believe that, you've got bigger issues. But it's kind of funny, and I agree with you. He probably is, but I'm assuming that this guy is not, of the everyday ilk, I guess you'd say. So that's why I hate that. I'm like, I almost feel bad for him, but it's just a line of demarcation for this team, because it was, like I said, it was a coagulation of all these things coming together. Trace Jackson Davis was not playing well. None of them were playing well. Hell, they were calling each other out saying, we're not tough enough. Mike Woodson was saying, we're not tough enough. We're not playing tough enough. They weren't. Everybody was saying it. I was saying it. Everybody across the deal was saying it. That's what cracked me up. But one thing got kind of catapulted as the flag that was waved at, which is not the deal, but it's just kind of becoming the representation for whatever reason. But it's just, I'm calling it the line of demarcation of when this team turned around. There was the team meeting. There had to be mental decisions. Hey, we've got to do something different, because look at what the hell they're doing. But their defense has been phenomenal. Trace Jackson Davis has been unbelievable. Jalen Hood-Schifino has really grown into his role, looks so comfortable out there. And even, like I said, Miller Kopp doing different things, different games. They still need to get some offensive output from somebody else, I think. Not that Michigan game was a little unique, but they're looking as good as I've seen it in 7 years. I sent that out. I agreed with you, Tronic. You got to go back to 2016. That's when you haven't seen Indiana basketball play like this since then.